black folk are still fighting for self-sufficiency and competitiveness in this country, and that we must come together quickly or what risk being a permanent underclass in society.
One of the alarming predictions you make in the book is along those lines. You mentioned that blacks will be pretty much a permanent underclass in America by the year 2015. Why the year 2015?
2015 because what I've concluded from analysis is that there are going to be a converging of social factors nationally and internationally that's going to place blacks in a permanent status of underclassship. And one, we anticipate by that point in time, based on all the research that's coming to us, that the next generation of whites is going to be more anti-black than they've been since the civil rights movement. Two, we anticipate by the same token about 86 million Hispanics coming into the United States and about 41 million Asians by that point in time, which is going to kick black folk out of being the minority in the society down to a minority. We've been number 2 in the society for 400 years as a group. We're going to become number 4. And if we have not gotten anything after being number 2 for 400 years, you guess what's going to happen when we become number 4. Because at that point in time, all the new groups coming into America, they're coming in higher than we are because this country operates off of a preferential acceptance program, which means that groups are coming in based on skin color, going from the lightest down to the darkest. Light, yellow, brown, black. And that's what our immigration laws are based on. And black folk will not be able to penetrate through those groups to get to the white society when that happens, because those groups owe us nothing. They don't understand our problems, and they're competitive with us, and we don't begin to be a little more aggressive about being in a competitive posture. They're going to eat our lunches.
Oh boy! Oh boy! Dr. Claude, yes! Dr. Claude Anderson. That was actually from the year 2000, I believe it was, either 1999 or 2000. He talks about the reality that black America was going to be facing coming into the 21st century. And boy, did he call it. He told y'all ahead of time. The reason I started this segment off with Dr. Claude was because, and again, I got to give capital B all the credit in the world, because they actually wrote a great article on how black communities are vanishing, which is of interest to me because, hey, what do you know? I live in a black community. It's called Gary, Indiana, the greatest city in all the world. Yes. And, but all over the country, black communities are vanishing, and Capital B has done a very good in-depth article on this. It says, over the past 50 years, gentrification has swept through hundreds of majority black neighborhoods, propelled by policies and practices that favor developers and newcomers, while longtime residents lose their footing. Hey, that's what Dr. Claude was telling you right here. Once thriving centers of black culture, business, and political power have been hollowed out as rents climb and home values surge. A new nationwide study has put this into perspective. No racial group or ethnic group has experienced more negative impacts from gentrification than black people, according to researchers from the National Community Reinvestment Coalition, a coalition of 700 nonprofit organizations focused on directing resources to America's most vulnerable communities. As hundreds of black communities across the country have been gentrified since 1980, more than 500,000 black people have been pushed from their homes. Those same neighborhoods have seen more than 3 million new, listen to this now, 3 million new Latino, Asian, and white residents, with cities like Atlanta, Washington, New York, and San Francisco witnessing entire neighborhoods transform within a single generation. In places like LA, you have Watts, which was 2/3 black at the onset of the 1980s, but is now 80% Latino. So how'd that happen? Huh? How'd that happen? Everybody getting on this radio station crying about ICE and crying about deported people? What? And our politicians, Karen Freeman Wilson, going down to the border to cry about, illegal immigrants and stuff? How did that happen? How did Watts become 80% Latino? Anybody want to tell me? No disrespect to the Latinos, but I'm just saying we have problems of our own. Always have. Over that same period, 92% of Los Angeles' majority black neighborhoods that experience gentrification are no longer majority black. That is a greater percentage of black neighborhood loss than any major metro area in the country. Washington, D.C. is a close second, losing 84% of its 55 majority black areas since 1980. Washington, D.C. used to be one of the chocolate cities alongside Gary, Indiana. So if it can happen in Washington, D.C., guess what can happen here in Gary, Indiana? And Detroit. Over the past decade, more than $1 billion of private and public money has flowed into property in Watts. Luxury condos and trendy cafes have replaced longtime family businesses, while rents soar beyond what existing residents can afford. This transformation is driven by capitalizing on Watts' prime location and cheap land values, turning what was once California's most neglected neighborhood into a profitable investment opportunity that pushes out the very community it claimed to help. Yeah. This study found that more than 500 majority black neighborhoods have been affected by this type of gentrification over the past 50 years. Today, half of these neighborhoods are no longer black. In comparison, 80% of white neighborhoods that experience gentrification remain white after the process. In total, 15% of urban American neighborhoods have been gentrified over the past 50 years. Gentrification most often takes place near downtown areas. The study has found with the downtown areas of Washington, D.C., New York, Philadelphia, New Orleans, Atlanta, and the San Francisco Bay topping the list. Atlanta's old Fourth Ward experienced such dramatic racial upheaval that it flipped. Now, this is Atlanta. Probably it's considered the black Mecca in this country. Atlanta's old Fourth Ward experienced such dramatic racial upheaval that it flipped from majority black to majority white after the East Side Trail of the Beltline opened in 2012, with gleaming apartment complexes rising on formerly vacant industrial land. More than 20,000 black residents were displaced from neighborhoods that had anchored generations of black families. In New York City's gentrifying neighborhoods like Harlem and Brooklyn, the informal networks of community connection where neighbors once acknowledged each other on the streets and gathered for impromptu block parties with music have been fractured as newcomers don't understand existing cultural norms and increasingly call 311 to complain about the expressions of black and Afro-Latino culture that defined these spaces for decades. Well, what do you think was going to happen? Now, what is gentrification and how does it work and who does it benefit? The term gentrification was coined by sociologist Ruth Glass in 1964, and it began to take hold in the United States during the mid-60s, especially as deindustrialization left urban, i.e. black neighborhoods, where black people settled during the Great Migration from the South, economically vulnerable and ripe for reinvestment by wealthier newcomers. And this is a situation right here where it's important to understand why it's important not only to talk about gentrification, but to talk about things like reparations and how much wealth has been stolen from black communities. just a few years ago in the Chicago Sun-Times. I know because I actually saved the article. I couldn't find it, but it said in the 1950s and 60s, Chicago's black community had $3 billion stolen from them by racist housing policies. This is on the front page of the Chicago Sun-Times. So there's no way you could talk about what's going on in Chicago. Everybody love to talk about how gangster Chicago is. Chicago's so gangster. Oh my God, look at all these YNs crashing out in Chicago. All of their families should be $3 billion richer. Think about how different Chicago would be right now if the black community, particularly the black community of Chicago, would be if their families, their grandparents, their great-grandparents hadn't had billions of dollars literally stolen from them in the 1950s and 1960s through racist housing policies like liar's loans they were forced into. They were forced to take loans that said that they own their homes, but they didn't actually own the home, and then they get kicked out of the home. Things like that. That's what they were doing to those black people in Chicago. And that's just one city. That's just one city. That happened to black people all over America. Most people's equity in this country comes from their homes. Black people not being able to have wealth tied to our homes because of things like that created the type of destruction that you saw in the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, during the crack era, and even into today where you're seeing the crash outs in places like Chicago. A lot of those people who are living in Cabrini Greens and Robert Taylor homes should have been living in nice neighborhoods, living in nice houses, should have been able to start businesses, black businesses in their community. And they would have done that if they had not been forced into liar's loans and other forms of racist housing policies. And that's why it's important. We just talked about Juneteenth last week. This is why it's important not to let the reparations discussion die. It ain't just about slavery. Don't just reduce this discussion about slavery. Long after slavery was over, America was still in black wealth, and they're continuing to do it to this day. And yet you have a lot of black people who are more concerned about other groups. Oh, I'm concerned about, look, fine. I'm pro upholding everybody's constitutional rights. But I'm certainly not about to help people displace black people and replace me, which is what a lot of y'all, and especially these black politicians, these Uncle Tom black misleadership class politicians seem to be intent on doing. They're literally on purpose bringing in people to replace you because, again, we talked about in the first block, the A block of the show, the corporate liberal wing of the Democratic Party that funds all of them and gives them all this money from Wall Street and all these other entities, people like Jim Clyburn and all these other folks, they always fighting for somebody else instead of you because they are paid. They are paid. They are ever bit the sellouts that Clarence Thomas is. And he is a sellout, but so are they. A lot of these black politicians are. They're going to talk about every group of people possible before they talk about reparations for you. And preserving black communities. Yeah, they'll say something here or there when it's time for election, but after they get your vote, they're gone once again. Now, black Americans are disproportionately and negatively impacted by gentrification due to a legacy of discriminatory housing policies like redlining, like exclusionary zoning, and unequal access to credit, which historically confined black residents to specific neighborhoods and limited their ability to build generational wealth. This is what it's about. As gentrification unfolds, it further deepens racial inequalities in housing, education, and economic opportunity. In Los Angeles, the displacement of black residents from historically black neighborhoods was a process that was orchestrated to then make room for gentrification. Marnie Campbell, an African-American studies professor at Loyola Marymount, explained how the convergence of multiple factors in the 1980s and 90s, including deindustrialization, the crack cocaine epidemic, mass incarceration, all three of those things were aimed specifically at black people. Deindustrialization, crack cocaine, and mass incarceration, done specifically to us, on purpose. We're in the city of Gary here right now. Our city was purposely murdered by the state of Indiana that purposely allowed capital flight, also known as white flight, to Maryville. Specifically, they broke their own rules. Hatcher used to talk about this all the time. They broke their own rules to allow this town of Maryville to exist, and it solely exists to take money out of Gary and to stop Gary from being able to have the type of wealth that it needed. They would not loan to Gary businesses for years. Everything went to Maryville. They did that same thing in black communities everywhere, especially places like Los Angeles, like Detroit, like Gary, like Cleveland, that had the nerve to elect black mayors. How dare you? How dare you want to be governed by yourself? Don't you know we're supposed to govern you forever and tell you what to do? The Democratic Party even considered taking, I guess they're probably not alive now, but this local Gary Democratic Party actually considered killing Mayor Hatcher before he was elected. You don't believe me? Ask Miss McCready. She'll tell you. This was a punishment. Deindustrialization was a punishment and to American workers, but specifically black people who didn't want to be lorded over. Crack cocaine, we know this. The CIA helped Nicaraguan drug cartels specifically flood our communities, starting in Los Angeles, again, with crack in the 80s. And mass incarceration, starting with Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon started the war on drugs specifically to go after hippies and black people. That's not me saying that. His own aide, John Ehrlichman, said this. Nixon didn't like hippies. He didn't like blacks. We started the war on drugs so we could attack them and their leaders. Ronald Reagan accelerated the war on drugs in black communities. Bill Clinton, Joe Biden accelerated even more. They accelerated it to the point where even though mass incarceration has fallen precipitously in the black community over the last 25 years, we're still the most incarcerated people on planet Earth. That's how high incarceration rates got in the 90s and early 2000s. All of those things were specifically aimed at us. Yet who do black politicians want to talk about? When the last time you seen them getting arrested to do something for black people? They getting arrested at immigration centers. When the last time they got arrested at a courtroom for all the black men who are being locked up in mass? When they getting arrested for that? Or they're getting arrested protesting for reparations for legacy black Americans? When the last time you saw that? I don't think you've seen that. What made LA especially unique was that when black families left these neighborhoods, they were primarily replaced by Latino families rather than white residents, creating a distinctive demographic shift. Oh, that's happening in Chicago now. Why you think you're seeing all those black people in Chicago yelling about the immigrants who are flooding into Chicago? They're there for a reason, to replace them. Here in Northwest Indiana, housing prices have gone up. We talked about that on this show. This is why I said don't sell your house. Don't abandon ship now. You lived through crack, you lived through heroin, you lived through all this other stuff. At least get a really, really good price for your house. Don't abandon ship now. We got $1 million houses in this region now, in this community now. $1 million houses. And it's because they intend on getting most of us up out of here. That's the point. That will always be the point. And this isn't about being racist against any particular group. This is how America has always worked. When Frederick Douglass was talking about immigrants elbowing black men out of jobs, he was talking about the Irish and then the Chinese and Italians and Poles and people like that. Booker T. Washington, W.B. Du Bois, Marcus Garvey, Coretta Scott King, 200 years of black leaders have told you what function mass immigration, particularly illegal immigration, serves when it comes to black communities. It is what it is. I know I got to go to a break here, but before I leave, I want to leave you with some more Dr. Claude. Like Dr. Claude, you know, he's going to give it to you straight with no chaser. Stay with us. We'll be back with the Happy right after these.
Of immigrants into the country. And that's what Dr. Price is talking about. And nobody, no black politician, no black organization wants to deal with that issue. They will avoid it at all costs, even though in their hearts they know that's one of the biggest problems for black folks. We anticipate in the next 10 to 12 years approximately 8 to 6 million Hispanics coming into the United States and 41 million Asians. You have been the majority minority for 400 years in this country. You have been the #2 population for 400 years. You're going to get kicked out of being #2. You're going to go down and become #4. Now, common sense, even a third grade education would tell you, if you didn't get anything when you were #2, you all jumped ahead of me, but anyway, you can guess what you're going to get when you become #4. And the worst part about it is as you descend and go down to #4, those other groups are going to go up. And as they go past you, you're going to have major racial clashes in this country. You're going to have fights all over this country between blacks and Hispanics, blacks and Asians, blacks and poor whites. And black folk cannot fight all these groups. Everybody can not always be against black folk. They know that we are vulnerable, we are defenseless. And we cannot fight those groups. Because you see, they didn't come into this country with the legacies that we are stuck with. Everybody in America has an advantaged position but black folk. But all are in a state of denial. The white power structure in a state of denial. They are pretending that everything they got, that 100% control and ownership of everything, they got it because they worked hard through a Protestant ethic. That's not how they got it. And you always hear them say, well, what you got to do, you got to work hard. Nobody can work any harder than a slave. Influx of immigrants into the country that are better equipped. They don't have your legacies. They don't have your disadvantages. They're walking across the border. They're going to get a free lunch. They don't have to pay dues. But you got public policies in this country that are equating them to black folk. They're equating them to black, and what we've allowed them to do, starting in 1970, is to wrap themselves in black folks' suffering and pretend somehow they've suffered along with black folk. And therefore, whatever program is created under this misguided label called minority, that they are equal to you and over you. And we're going to deal with that whole concept of minority in a